Today I'm making sourdough raisin bread. This is what you'll need for day 1. 300 grams of active starter, 650 grams of water, 50 grams of honey, 40 grams of oil, 1,000 grams of bread flour, 20 grams of salt. Now, as you can see here, all I did was add all of this to a bowl and mix it up. I just use a butter knife to mix it up, get all of the flour kind of wet and incorporated, and then you are going to cover that up and let it autolyse for 1 hour. It will be kind of shaggy looking, but don't worry about it. Then in another bowl, right before your 1 hour is up, you're going to want to boil some water and soak 300 grams of raisins and cover that up. Now that your 1 hour autolyse time is done, it's time to add the salt. So as you can see, I'm just sprinkling the salt over the top. I'm going to add a little bit of water to the top here. I just misted some on, or you can put some water on your hands, and you're going to mix that thoroughly with clean hands. I'm just doing kind of a stretch and fold to kind of get it all mixed in, and then get a little bit more of the salt put in until you have it all completely mixed in. Be careful of adding too much water here. You really just want enough to the tips of your fingers so that the dough no longer sticks, but you don't want to add a whole lot more water to this recipe. When you're done mixing the salt in, you're going to gather your dough and put it in a nice smooth ball and let it sit for 30 minutes in a covered bowl. Now it's time to take those raisins that you soak and drain them thoroughly and make sure that they get as dry as possible. You should be able to see the difference between the dried raisins and the now plump raisins. It's time to uncover that dough and start working those raisins in. This is the hardest part of the entire process. You're going to slowly add the raisins into your dough. So you're going to sprinkle some of them, maybe a third of them, on the top of your dough. And you're going to do some stretch and folds. Wet your hands so the dough doesn't stick. Get them worked into the dough. And then you'll gently add maybe another third of the raisins, and then finally the final third. This might take you a few minutes. If the dough starts to feel kind of tight, just put the cover on, let it sit for 5 minutes, take the cover off, and work a little bit more. I know this seems like a lot of raisins, but when it bakes up, you'll be glad that you have that many in there. You're definitely going to feel like all of these raisins are never going to make it into the dough, but believe me, once you start folding and get it all together, they will fit in there. After you have all of the raisins inside your bread and you have it in a nice taut ball, place the cover on top and let it sit and rest for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, it's time to divide the dough into 2, because this makes 2 loaves of raisin bread, which freeze very well. So notice I'm just dividing the dough. After your dough has been divided evenly, you are going to shape your dough once again and let it sit out on the counter for 15 minutes and rest. The final step of this process, you are going to place each dough ball into a container that you're going to cover and place in the refrigerator overnight up to 24 hours. So on day 2 in the morning, the first thing I did was take my dough out, put it on the counter, and you're going to let it come to room temperature for 2 hours. After you've gotten your dough out, one of the things that you need to do during those 2 hours is get your cinnamon sugar mixture ready. So it's 2 tablespoons of cinnamon and a half a cup of brown sugar for each loaf. So I just did it in 2 different containers because I'm going to use that mixture to spread on each loaf. So now it's time to turn the dough out and get it into a rectangle shape so you can start to spread the cinnamon sugar mixture. Notice that I'm gently moving the dough out. It has gained some bubbles and gas in it to start making the bread fluffy and airy. I don't want to use a rolling pin at this. I'm going to do kind of just a stretch using wet fingers and push down with my fingers a little bit. I don't want to degas this. It's not like a yeasted loaf of bread. Once I get my dough stretched out into a nice size rectangle, I am going to start spreading the cinnamon sugar mixture. I'm going to use about 2/3 of it on this large rectangle. And then I'm going to do an envelope fold. So that just simply means that I'm going to be folding in thirds. So I'm spreading out the mixture from one of my containers. And now I'm folding over the sides. And then I'm just kind of pushing down and spreading the dough out to make it a little bit wider. And then I will top it with the remaining 1/3 of cinnamon sugar mixture. Push down, stretch out that dough so that you get it a little bit wider and you get some of the cinnamon sugar mixture from the inside kind of embedded into the dough itself. And you are going to be folding this into thirds and then rolling it into a loaf shape. Now the brown sugar and cinnamon are going to make a very gooey, sticky mixture, so you are going to use parchment paper in your loaf pans. The first time I baked this, a lot of the cinnamon sugar mixture kind of seeped out. So you're going to want to make sure that you seal your loaves good and just be aware of the possibility of the mixture kind of baking out and bubbling up a little bit and getting very hot. Now I'm ready to roll up my dough and make sure that I seal the seams very well before I start on my second loaf. If you need to, add a little bit of water to your fingers to get the dough to stick together. Place it in your parchment-lined loaf pan and put it off to the side and repeat the process with your second loaf. Now that you have both loaves shaped, you are going to cover them and put them in some area in your kitchen so that they can rise for the next 4 to 5 hours until they are about 1 inch above the pan. And at that point, you know that it's ready for them to be baked. You are going to bake this in a 400-degree oven for 15 minutes and then turn the oven down to 375 and continue baking for another 30 minutes. Make sure that the temperature on the inside has reached 200 degrees. This is a family favorite recipe. We have been making this for the past year and have really enjoyed it. I hope you'll give it a try. The flavorful sourdough, the ribbons of cinnamon and sugar, and the plump raisins make it amazing. And thanks for joining me here at White Shadow Fare.